Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today's guest is Mesh Gelman, the CEO of Cumulus Coffee, a home cold brew coffee appliance and system. Mesh is a longtime Starbucks guy who I'd known for years, way back when I talked to him when he was still at Starbucks. And so I reconnected with him because he's running this new startup that's making a cold brew coffee system for the home as well as office and commercial environments. And so we catch up about this and hear about his vision for building out the Cumulus coffee ecosystem. So it was a really interesting conversation. Hope you enjoy it. If you haven't already checked out Smart Kitchen Summit 2025, please do so now. Just go to smartkitchensummit.com. We will be talking to all sorts of leaders in the food innovation and food tech space. So check that out. All right, folks, let's get to my conversation with Mesh Gelman.
This podcast is part of the Spoon Podcast Network, home of smart conversations that feed your mind.
All right, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi there, I'm Mesh Gelman. I'm the founder and CEO of Cumulus Coffee. We are a on-demand cold brew nitro and cold espresso system that delivers a delicious, crisp beverage in under 60 seconds.
And I'm excited to try out the Cumulus. I have a soft spot for coffee gadgets. I wrote quite a bit about my journey with the spin, for example. So I'm excited to try it out, Mesh. But let's get into the journey to build Cumulus. You are a longtime coffee industry guy. You worked at Starbucks, I think, for quite a number of years, right?
Yes. Yeah. I was there for a while. You know, there's an old expression, once a green apron, always a green apron.
And so I think you were in innovation. And
Yes.
were you thinking at the time back then that you might start like your own coffee hardware making company?
Quite the contrary. When I left Starbucks, I actually was very committed to do anything but coffee. And it was more just, it was more like I was interested in the left side of my email address and not the right side, the M. Gelman part, not the Starbucks part. And I was like, okay, I'm going to innovate and it's not going to be in coffee and I'm going to stay away from it. And that lasted about 6 months.
And so it wasn't that you were burned out. You just wanted to kind of see if you could do innovation outside of coffee, but you came back to it. But before we jumped into kind of how you came up with the epiphany for Cumulus, give us a little more detail on what you did at Starbucks and innovation. Were you looking for new approaches in coffee, new hardware making devices? What were you doing there?
Yeah, so my Starbucks journey was a fun one. And really, it was a privilege and honor to have a front row seat to one of the greatest consumer companies in our time. And I had a few stops on my journey in Starbucks. I started in the retail part of the business and primarily responsible for when you walk into a Starbucks store is known as the lobby, the area before the barista says, "Hey, Michael, what would you like?" All the product and merchandise that's there is what Starbucks refers to as the retail portion of the business. Yep. And, when I joined the company, we had it was way before the takeover of the mobile app and drive-through, when people actually still going into the store and waiting online and everything like that.
Which I still do, by the way. I still enjoy that experience of going to order a coffee. I know I might be in the minority there.
But there's something magical about it, right?
Yeah.
There's some, it's all about that moment of connection, which is what the company was really built on. But we had this, this interesting situation where we had millions and millions of customers coming in every day. So what they call in retail, all these eyeballs, but yet all they were interested in was their coffee from the barista, right? And if there was a way to actually disrupt and create some interest for them along that journey, whether it was through, discovering new snacks and emerging brands or things like that, maybe they'd actually stop and instead of feeling agitated by the length of the line, use that to eyebrows and look around and find innovative things. In that assortment, obviously, was, Starbucks sells a lot of coffee that you can make at home, whether it's packaged coffee or K-Cups or Vias or things like that, and coffee beverages in the refrigerator. So even from the beginning of my journey, there was a big part of what I did that was involved with selling coffee into people's homes through what happened in the retail store. Ultimately, midway through my journey at Starbucks, this concept that I had tapped into these young and emerging brands to identify innovation, whether it was in consumables, whether it was in food product, or even in drinkware or other things like that, made us realize that there was this opportunity to kind of use the intersection of innovation and also the intersection of the scale that Starbucks has. So when you think about, not everything can be born inside, but if you sometimes look outside, you could see exciting innovations and trying to figure out what that intersection is. And can you unlock massive scale for an emerging concept or a growth idea or something like that? It's like a win-win, for the startup and for the company at scale. And back at that time, we had started a division of the company called Siren Ideas, which is all about ideas.
What year was this around?
This was like 2000, and right after Howard had retired. So I would say like 2015, 16.
Retired for like the second or third time? Forget how.
It was the second time, yeah.
Okay.
So it was when Kevin Johnson stepped in as CEO, and it was right about that time. And Siren Ideas was born with this idea of not just limited to, let's say, specifically the retail part of the business, but overall innovation, what's happening outside and externally, right? And where can they be this interesting intersection of where we could use and solve big problems. So I think kind of like for me, and the idea to ultimately when I left Starbucks was this notion around large companies see problems that are very macro, and those opportunities are really, really robust, big opportunities. And kind of like by matching that to growth opportunities or to innovation, it could be explosive. But like the things that worry companies doing billions and billions of dollars are needle movers. They're not just these little ideas. There's big problems that have to be solved. And to me, that was very exciting. How do we go ahead and understand these big problems and then innovate against it?
And when you say big problems, maybe it's both, like big world problems like sustainability, let's reduce packaging, but also maybe big problems or shifts in consumption habits. Like, hey, a bunch of teens are starting to drink bubble tea. That might be something we need to think about. Was it a mix of all these things?
It was primarily on the sales and revenue side of things.
Okay.
Kind of like where the consumer is going. On the consumer side, how do we unlock? Or exactly like your example, is bubble tea interesting? Is it niche? Is it worth is the juice worth the squeeze?
Which, by the way, I don't think it is. And I don't know why Starbucks hasn't done anything there, but maybe an answer for that. But yeah, so.
Yeah. So I think that was the idea, is like, because this is like this very simple principle is that when you think of an idea, there's something about the moment in time where you thought of that idea, but the world kind of continues, right? So what interesting thing that happens is that by the time you build what you're building and you put it out in the market and it gains traction and it sprouts and it starts becoming recognized, the original thesis that you had at that moment, if it didn't evolve with that journey, because the world just kept on going, it's going to it will be stale, right? So it's like, it's really important to constantly crank that innovation thought and, develop it to the point where it could scale.
Interesting. So you have a thesis, an idea, and it may take time to germinate. And as you develop it along the way, you have to really think about how it needs to be birthed into a world that may have changed from the original concept. And so you need to build in flexibility as part of the evolution plan to build up these new ideas.
You said that so much better than me. Exactly.
Well, so at some point you decided to leave, and then you said you had about a 6-month time. When you left, were you saying, hey, I just need a change of pace, I'm tired, Starbucks works me hard, or why did you part ways with Starbucks?
I was really excited about this idea of problems at scale or growth opportunities at scale. And Starbucks, which is always one of the most innovative companies in the world, having a front row seat and seeing the challenges of growth and innovation. But think about it, if a company is doing 25, 30 billion in revenue, right, it's hard enough just to comp your numbers year to year or quarter to quarter, right? But the street wants growth. And how do you grow? What is a 0.5 point of EPS growth? Like that's a lot of hard work. That's hundreds of millions of dollars of new revenue that you didn't have before, right? And it's kind of like this, like that's a lot of pressure on companies. And so what I recognized was that if Starbucks, had this like insatiable thirst for innovation, there must be a lot of like really great companies out there that can go ahead and use this type of innovation. So how can we get close to large companies and really get to the core of where their concerns are? What are they learning about their customer or about their value proposition that may be losing some momentum? And then are there innovation opportunities against that? With the idea that through doing this, maybe the innovation isn't around a cup of coffee. Maybe it's about something else that's really exciting and I couldn't apply that learning to Starbucks. Maybe it made sense for a different large company or large organization. And by using those insights to be able to develop and build something for a clearly identifiable white space.
So you left with maybe the idea to sit and think for a while, a little more stillness, and think about where you might want to go. And then at some point, did this epiphany happen? Like you're in the shower or you're ordering coffee and you realize how much you like cold brew. How did this epiphany for a nitro cold brew machine come into your head?
So when I was at Starbucks, it was about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when Starbucks launched cold brew. And I was a hot drinker. My drink of choice prior to that was a triple grande soy latte with the third shot on top. And it was like multiple times a day. But when we came out at that time with Nariño 70 in the toddy and serving cold brew, what started off as tasting it in development started becoming at some point like my second cup of coffee or maybe my third cup of coffee. A year later, right when we opened up the roastery in Seattle, I remember coming to the day before the pre-opening or the soft opening to it. And I was given a glass of nitro cold brew. And I look at it and it's like kind of like, very similar. This is it actually.
Yeah.
I was drinking my afternoon drink right here, and it's like it was frothy, and it looked like it was like a cold latte. I don't even know what it was.
A little bit like a Guinness, halfway between a coffee and a Guinness, right?
Right. I mean, look at right, like totally. And
Yeah.
I was like, and like one little thing. So I keep a kosher diet, and in kosher dietary laws, you can't mix meat and milk. Right. If you have a meat meal, you have to wait a little bit before you have dairy. And I had actually just had lunch, and I had a meat lunch or a chicken lunch, and when I saw that cup, I was like, I would love to try it, but I can't drink.
You thought there was some milk in there, right?
Yeah,
because of the foam.
And the barista was like, no, there's nothing in it. It's just like nitro, and like it's like I'm like, no. And she's like, no, seriously, like enjoy it. And I took like one gulp of it, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be in trouble. This is like full of dairy. And I went behind the counter, I'm looking underneath, and like, lo and behold, it was like this transformative experience of just like the word doesn't match the beverage. The word nitro cold brew has like this, like almost like this aggressive sounding sound
speed.
Yeah, something. And it's like, actually, it's like a sweet and creamy and a decadent kind of like dessert in a cup type of beverage. So it's almost like there's like this mismatch about, what the experience is.
Yeah. Nitro to me adds like a softer mouthfeel. Like you have that great head to it. And like it does really add to the mouthfeel without a lot of like chemical or sweeteners or dairy, right? Without any of that. It just changes the nature of the feel of the drink, which I think is the really enjoyable part of nitro cold brew. And in addition to obviously the cold brew part, which is reduced acidity, et cetera, and smoothness.
It's so interesting that you highlight that, Michael, because if you really come to think about it, between the smoothness of cold brew and the sweet and creamy nature and the effervescence that happens from nitro, right? A lot of like bad habits where I think people put sugar and cream and other things into a cup. Even if you do it, you're going to do less with a nitro cold brew because you're not trying to mask that acidity because of cold brew. That's why I think the younger generation loves it so much, because it's like so smooth. And then you add that like the natural sweetness and creaminess that you get with the infusion of the nitrogen. It's like, it's I don't know, it's like really a pleasant beverage and very healthy.
So you had this moment at the Starbucks flagship roastery in Seattle, which is a great venue, by the way, on Capitol Hill. I enjoy going there. Being in Seattle. So you had this epiphany and you started thinking, man, I really like cold brew. Maybe it changed your habits over time. You said your second cup over time became a nitro cold brew or whatever. And then like you probably kept thinking about it over time. And when you were like sitting still in your or a sabbatical, maybe was it a sabbatical, or you're just kind of thinking of your next thing? You thought, oh, maybe I need to make something to help people make this at home.
So what had happened was that somewhere along this journey, it went from being my second cup to my only cup. And I don't know the moment when that happened. I don't remember. It wasn't like, I wasn't trying to do something. It's just like, I look back, I don't remember when I stopped drinking hot coffee, but it was somewhere along that point where it just became my beverage of choice. And for me, I think the insight really was that as this platform of cold was growing at Starbucks, seeing kind of like the manual process of how cold brew is made, sometimes experiencing the natural inconsistencies that would happen in the quality of the beverage because of human error or human involvement as it's made in every store, led to this kind of like understanding about that something that we like as much as we do is actually really challenging. And nitro cold brew requires a very big setup. Oftentimes it was needed to be serviced, the nitrogen tanks, or we ran out of it. And the most interesting thing about cold brew, remember, is because it takes, if you want to enjoy cold brew today, you have to brew it yesterday. If you miss and you forecast wrong or you plan wrong, right, you're either going to have way too much or you're not going to have enough. And like, if you kind of think about that, here is a coffee shop like Starbucks where they have a light roast, a medium roast, a dark roast, multiple espressos, but you can't do that on cold. So you were, as a customer, you're kind of stuck to kind of like the operational complexities around cold brew, like kind of forced you into a certain behavior, right? You had to drink that one choice only if it was in stock, only if it wasn't available. And it kind of created this, like, in a way, you think about this whole idea of choice and variety and customization that you could have with coffee at the coffee level was all missing from cold. And it was like, I think just like day by day, just being aware of the growth pains around the most important part of the growth story for a company as large as Starbucks over the last decade made me realize, I think that was kind of like the epiphany that there had to be a better way to do it. Add that to another insight, was that us as consumers, people, we've now come to expect so much from our home, whether it's from our Peloton, our Sonos, our Ring, right? We have state-of-the-art technology and devices that make our life so simple. In the coffee business, it's the same way. In the hot coffee part, there's so many fantastic ways to make a great cup of coffee. But yet the coffee that we really want, 75% of all beverages coming out of Starbucks are on ice, right? And that's just Starbucks, right? It's like, it's a bolt-on business everywhere. We need to take a step back and say, let's delete everything we know and let's craft something for cold. And that was kind of the genesis of Cumulus.
Okay. And this was, I think I've read somewhere it took you about 5 years to work on this thing. Was this around the 2020 timeframe? When did this start?
I would say late 2018 is when.
Okay, 2018. Okay.
Yeah, picked up in earnest. Yeah.
And you had this idea. And what was your next step? Did you start to look for partners? I don't know if you had built a hardware product before. Like, did you, now that you had the idea, what were you thinking, what do I do next? And what did you do next?
I've been very fortunate along my career to really understand that it's all about the people that you have around you. And I have, colleagues and friends, great industrial designers, engineers, and things like that. And I started talking about this idea, and I'm like, hey, can you start working on this problem for me or this opportunity for me? And let's start developing, and please think and help me create something that is net new to the market that's never been done before. And we went on this journey of development, and it was really two-part. It was really about, in order to make this work, we had to be able to create something that was super frictionless and created the most premium experience all at the same time. And those were the barriers to entry. If we can't do that, then we shouldn't start the business.
Yeah. Did you just have your friends work on this kind of for free and lend their time, or did you go raise money and then hire some people and then ask them to do this?
No, I bootstrapped it at the beginning, paid engineers and paid industrial designers to work on this. And it was only after, I would say, 3 or 3.5 years, once we reached a point where we had solved some really important technical challenges and we had a pathway to commercialize this product, Cumulus went out and raised money to be able to fund the further development and the go-to-market for the company.
And that's a long runway, right? Like, so bootstrapping something for 3.5 years to get to this idea of, okay, this is a viable concept. You had to really pull a lot out of pocket. And so at that point, you actually went out and raised your first seed round. Did you bootstrap it up to that point, essentially?
Yeah, I bootstrapped it up until the end of 22.
Okay.
So had to dig deep for it and really had to have a lot of conviction, because it was like, okay, seriously, another month of this.
Yeah.
One of the things we did early, which I think really helped tell the story, was not only invest in the technology and the development of the machine, but actually hired one of the most marquee branding agencies to help us create the brand, right? Because the problem we were going out to solve and the opportunity ahead of us is really, really large. Cold coffee and where it is, and the lack of a premium on-demand solution that is just top shelf. We needed a brand that would actually convey that, not just like some kind of kitschy feel and look and feel. We needed something that was steeped in heritage of coffee, signaled kind of like newness and kind of trend. So it's like a very hard balancing act. So we actually went and invested before we even had raised any money in the work necessary to present the brand the right way.
And the branding incorporated obviously the name, I would imagine, but also the industrial design possibly. Did they have some like inputs into the way this thing looks and feels?
No, the industrial design was, we actually started with industrial design.
Okay. So I think it's a good looking piece of hardware, and the consumer experience looks, I haven't tried it, but it looks like it's fairly straightforward. So, but in terms of just the name and the marketing components, you said you invested in that pretty heavily.
The creative part. So like the colors and kind of like how the brand look and feels to be able to tell the whole story.
And so when you decided, okay, it's viable, I need to actually ask for some money besides pulling it out of my own bank account, you went and raised money. And I know that at some point Howard wrote a check. So was that one of the first visits for you to call Howard Schultz and say, hey, do you want to invest? Or had you guys been talking all along about this?
I think I'm trying to remember what year it was, but I sent him a video of the first nitro cold brew coming out of some like rickety rack thing on a bench top. And he's like, what is that? I'm like, this is the future. And then I think it was like later on when I was talking to him, he was like, Mesh, whenever you're ready, I want to be involved in this. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready yet. I don't know if I'll ever be able to bring this to market. I have to answer a few questions first. But once that's done, I promise I'll call you.
And so that call was made. And where are you guys in terms of your fundraising? Have you guys disclosed how much you've raised?
Yeah, so we've done a seed round and a seed extension, and just a little bit over 32 million total.
Which is a lot for a seed. That's a pretty good seed. Was Howard one of the big check writers, or did he lead it?
Howard was from the first checks in when we did our first the seed round. Yeah.
And I can see why you need that much money. I mean, I've seen a lot of hardware startups come and fail, and kind of because they didn't have enough money. So getting that product to market, building out the manufacturing side, and then that inventory. Can you talk about like that investment that needs to make to bring like a modern piece of hardware to market? Because it is a lot, it takes a lot of money.
It does. And I think that was kind of like where, before I had raised the money, kind of like was those like critical milestones. And it was like, I kept on asking myself, do we have enough to show yet that we could get and raise enough money for us to do the work? And if the answer was no, we didn't answer enough questions, or we didn't demonstrate enough things that we can do, then it's not time to raise. And I got to keep on bootstrapping it. So you could imagine with each passing month, especially like what we needed to unlock from a technology perspective and a capabilities perspective in order to be able to say, okay, right, the concept's here, the pathway to commercialization's here. We've answered these critical questions, but yet it's still going to, like, as you mentioned, when you build a piece of hardware outside of the like kind of like the non-reoccurring fees to just do the technology development, but also then the hard fees. You have to make molds to shape the product, and you have to go and do all the R&D work and multiple, pilot runs and sample. There's a lot of money involved, and that's only half the story. The other half is the coffee and being able to, our capsules are a very special and unique product that we had to also build from the ground up, including a custom production line with, machinery and retrofitting machinery in ways that have never been done before. So like when you think about those two worlds colliding,
it's a lot.
It's a lot. And you have to really understand the size of the prize in order to have that conviction.
And so let's talk about the technology so people listening have an understanding. So it's a machine that also has a consumable component that you sell, which you're talking about in the capsules. Talk about briefly the machine and the capsules and how it makes a cup of coffee.
Sure. So the machine kind of has like a few core pieces of technology in it. Number one, it's all about having that crisp, cold cup of coffee on demand. So if you kind of think about like what's the most important thing that a customer wants, or somebody wants, an individual wants when they enjoy a cup of cold coffee, is they want it to be crisp cold. Let's start with that. So that was one hurdle, right? Obviously, when you think about refrigeration and how complicated it is to cool off, and then when you go to the other extreme, when you do flash chilling and how expensive that is. So how do you kind of find a happy medium to be able to have a system that you can on demand deliver a crisp cold beverage? That was kind of like one big technology hurdle. The other hurdle, which was equally complicated, was this idea and notion is that, kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, a cup of nitro cold brew is like walking onto an airplane and being offered a first class seat instead of going to the back. And if we could deliver a premium experience every single time, why would you ever choose to go further and have a cold brew? If we could upgrade your experience to give you something that is better than a cafe quality at the push of a button, and in order to do that, the first hurdle is like, we didn't want to be dealing with kind of like a nitrogen tank and like kind of like think about like, what do I do with the empties? What happens if I run out in middle and midstream it stops or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, there's an abundance of nitrogen in the air. 79% of the air that we breathe is nitrogen. So if we could harness that and do inline infusion into our beverage, perhaps we could unlock something really special. And that was the other thing that we were able to accomplish. The third thing that was really important.
So you're not using nitrogen tanks. Like you're not like, people don't have to subscribe or buy replacement nitrogen tanks?
Nope. All you need.
And you're
to
saying
do,
that doesn't compromise the quality of like what would happen with injected nitrogen?
I almost want to say it's better because you never run out. It never runs out. So like you never have a situation where there's like operational failure, right? It's just like always and every single time. I mean, look at this. I mean, we're like 40 minutes into this call and like, look at that nitrogen. It's like, look at the head on the cascade on this cup. Whoop, there it is. Yeah. It just doesn't go anywhere. It's like so rich and creamy. It's actually fascinating. That took a lot of work. And then I think the third thing, which is really exciting, is that our machine also makes a cold pressed espresso. And when you think about that, which is an espresso is the base of so many delicious beverages, whether it's a ice shaken espresso, ice latte, an espresso martini. And today to do that, to start with a hot espresso shot and then ice it or whatever is necessary to make it is almost counterintuitive. What if I start off with a smooth, delicious cold espresso shot? So the technology to be able to pressurize and create that espresso with that crema, what we've come to expect from a high quality espresso shot, to do that in cold is also quite remarkable. And I would say, lastly, that the third thing that is really important is how are we going to be good stewards of the earth and how do we keep this machine clean? And we had to develop a logic and a system that allowed for the machine to, because we have no heat in here, this is only cold. And so typically in a hot coffee machine, as soon as you boil the water, that's a kill cycle. We had to use water and air pressure to be able to clean the machine after each use. And we took that same idea and concept and we actually cleaned the capsule before the machine returns it to you. So as a result, our capsules, which are 100% aluminum, as you can see right here, when they come out of the machine, they come out empty. And all you do is put it into your regular recycling bin, like a can of soda. So it's upstream recycling. It's forever material. There's never any waste in it or anything like that.
Is what's inside the capsule a kind of a concentrate liquid, or is it like, talk about what's in those capsules?
Yeah, sure. So our capsules, what we have in here is that we have a very controlled process on extracting the cold brew, doing it what's most important with time to be able to keep avoiding the heat hitting the coffee. Because when you actually introduce heat to coffee, the chlorogenic acids get activated, which creates that acidity that many people react very strongly to. Having that precise process, we do that in a controlled environment. And then if we understand that that heat actually creates that kind of acidity, or for that matter, anything volatile that happens to the coffee will ruin the flavor, we're faced with another challenge. How do we, in a very calm way, concentrate this or remove the water, right, without actually messing with the structure of the coffee? Is there a way that we could protect the coffee at the same time remove it? Traditional methods either use heat like boil off the water or pressure. But if those two things would create volatility, we had to work on a natural process that allowed us to remove the water to create our capsule. And that's what we have in here. So we do this the slow way, and then we encapsulate it and we shelf stable. It never has any heat touching it, and send it off to you.
So is it, and I'm sorry for this curiosity, do you remove all liquid? So is it like a dry kind of,
No,
or is it, there's some kind of like, just like it's a very condensed? Okay.
yeah, I know I'm doing a little jiggle in front of the camera.
Yeah.
But it's very condensed, and it's still liquid. It's still in the liquid form.
Okay. And so this is a system that requires essentially a subscription or buying proprietary capsules from your company. And so you have two businesses. You have the hardware manufacturing of the maker, and then also the capsules. So do you see over time maybe opening up that capsule business to let other, like maybe a Starbucks provide? If obviously that would be a dream if you guys get big enough. But how do you see the capsule business evolving?
Well,
and
yeah, it's fascinating because I like to think of Cumulus as a coffee company, not as a machine company. Part of what you could see, I don't know if you could see the machine behind me, but the design of it is very minimalistic. And we don't want this to be about the machine. We really want this to be about you and the moment you're enjoying the cup. As cliche as that might sound, it's really about the coffee experience. If we're not going to be able to deliver an amazing experience in your cup, then you're not going to want to engage. So Cumulus, we launched with 8 different coffee varieties. And to do that, we actually sampled and tasted over 350 different coffees. And what we did is, like in hot coffee, you cup for this process called cupping, where you taste it along the way. We do the same thing for cold. So we choose our varieties. We choose the locations where these are sourced from, all based on what we're trying to accomplish in the cup. Ultimately, when it's cold, what does it taste like as a nitro cold brew? What will it taste like as a cold espresso? And we are building out a portfolio of coffee varieties that are optimized for that cold experience, right? So like kind of like at every stop, from our roast profiles, we had to design completely new roast profiles in order to be able to ensure that cup quality that we're really aiming for.
I mean, there's a lot of, when I go to Amazon, there's a lot of cold brew machines, but they're not obviously as complicated as yours, or cold brew systems that are pretty low tech. How do you break through the noise? Because I think your appliance is going to retail for $695, $700 or so. That's a big ask. We've seen that in those higher price points. You really have to work to convince people to buy it, and whether that's anything in the kitchen, because Americans in particular are used to buying cheap hardware. So how do you see yourself differentiating and asking people to spend $700 on a system?
I think that instead of what we've been seeing in these few months that we've been in market, and kind of like where the real value proposition really lies, is the ability to get better than cafe quality cold, which is the beverage of choice, at the push of a button where you are. So whether you're in your home or out of your home, if you're out of a coffee shop, you're in your office, right? You're at your doctor's office, or you're in a cafe that sells bagels but wants to sell coffee as well, right? It's very hard to get the beverage that you really want and you really crave today in the quality that you want. And when you look at it through that perspective and the amount of effort it takes to be able to have that, the coffee and Cumulus is an unlock on that opportunity and experience. And that is really kind of like what this is. It's like, Michael, treat yourself. You love cold coffee. Don't compromise. We could make this so frictionless, so easy, and such high quality, right, that this will be like your go-to. And not only are you going to start in the morning, early in the morning, but you're going to go throughout the day. You might take a non-caffeinated beverage midday, and you might close it out with an espresso martini. But cold coffee has such an important place in your life. This is a very, very good investment.
And I would imagine price point doesn't matter as much in commercial environments or maybe office environments. Are you chasing that office or like small coffee or food shop that wants to add a new product line? Is that a key part of your focus for this rollout?
Yes, for multiple reasons. I think one is because of the problem that we're solving, right? So if a coffee shop today has such challenges to deliver a great cold beverage, cold brew's difficult, nitro cold brew's difficult. And once you leave a dedicated space for coffee, like a coffee shop, it becomes even that more challenging. We see this as a massive unlock, a massive opportunity, whether it's those independent, cafes or of eateries or bars that want great espresso martinis, or offices or things like that. The other thing that's really important about this space, it gives you, an individual, a way to experience it before you make the investment. If you have a Cumulus in your office and you're taking it daily and you're constantly experiencing it, and all of a sudden you start realizing that everything else you have doesn't measure up, we will end up in your home on your counter.
The manufacturing of hardware today it's an interesting terrain we're in. Like lots of things are changing under our feet as we speak. I don't know, where are you manufacturing in China, or where are you manufacturing this?
Yeah, our machines are made in China.
So what have you had to do, or what have some of the conversations been with regards to tariffs, and had you had to change anything to kind of make sure you can meet the price point you want to meet?
Well, like everybody, I think it's navigating unknown waters, quite literally. Fortunate for us, our manufacturer has multiple locations in other countries as well that aren't subject to the China tariffs. So I think we're a little bit, we caught a lucky break with our partner of choice, that we don't have that immediate headwind that could throw things out of balance, especially for a young company. But I think long term we'll just have to see where things shape out.
All right. And if people want to pick up a Cumulus system, it's available on your website. Are you guys in? I think you guys might be in Williams-Sonoma. Are you at retail yet?
We're in a few Williams-Sonomas. When we launched in holiday of last year, we also launched in some of their flagship stores. But the primary place to get involved with Cumulus is on our website.
All right. Hey, well, Mesh Gelman, the CEO and founder of Cumulus, thanks for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Michael. It was great chatting.